This is Jay Mancini. Welcome to my channel. As you already know, where we keep the wheels rolling and the cash flowing. So guys, today we're going to be talking about what you need to know when buying a dump truck. I've actually had a lot of requests and several comments. And guys, by the way, I appreciate you dropping those comments, but I've had several requests and comments. Individuals asking me, hey Jay, what do I do or what do I look for when I'm going to go out and buy my first truck? So guys, this one's for you. Today, I'm gonna be walking you through what you wanna look for when you're buying your first dump truck. So guys, if you don't already know, I'm actually a broker here in the greater Houston area. We're a brokerage company. And we have a lot of dump trucks that work for us on any given day, throughout the week. When I first started, guys, one of the things that I wanted to do was, obviously not knowing anything about a dump truck, I had to learn, and I'm being very transparent with you, the hard way. But one of the things that I did do, I was smart enough to think about, well, if I don't know enough about a truck and what to look for when I buy a dump truck, what I did is I actually brought somebody with me that actually had quite a bit of experience when it comes to the trucking and dump trucks in general. So this is how I first started to learn about what to look for in a truck or in a dump truck, right? And so today we're gonna be talking about those things. Now, fast forward, guys, throughout the years, I went from having one truck to having two to eventually having 10 trucks. Now, as I've gone through my experiences, there's gonna be a lot of different things that you learn to look for. So I'm gonna be giving you what to look for in a dump truck, and I'm also gonna be giving you some tips and suggestions that have worked for me in the last several years that I've been in the business. So guys, to kick things off, first and most important, we're gonna talk about the engine. This is the most important part of the truck. Why? Because it's the most expensive part of the truck. So let's dive in. Okay guys, so as I was saying, the first and most important part is the engine. And of course, guys, this is what I call the heart of the truck, okay? Why? Because this bad boy here is what makes everything else go, right? So if your engine is not in good shape, guess what? You don't want to buy that truck, because you're going to be looking at spending a lot of money, okay? And depending on what kind of engine it is, you could be looking at anywhere between $10,000 and above. So you definitely want to look for, first thing is make sure that the engine does not have any oil leaks, okay? Let me explain to you why. If the engine has oil leaks, that means that internally there's something not right. So what you want to do is you want to check for oil leaks. That's the first thing. Now, down here, and you'll see here throughout the video that there's going to be certain areas that you want to be looking out for oil leaks, where there's joints. There's going to be also a very important area in the bottom that you're going to want to look for. Want to make sure there's no oil leaks at the bottom of the truck, okay? Here's another thing. What I usually do is I'll ask the guy who's selling the truck, or the individual, right? How long has this truck been sitting here? It's a tip, okay? Let me tell you why this is a tip. Because if they sit there and tell you, well, the truck's been sitting here for a day or 2 days or 3 days, what you want to do is you want to look at the bottom. If the ground is wet, okay, and you see that it's old, then maybe it could have been there before. But if, let's say, the truck had been working the day before or previously, and it's a fresh, what I mean by fresh, it's wet, and then you see an oil stain, okay, that means that it's probably coming from the engine in that truck, and that is a no-go. So you're gonna look for what's called the gasket, the valve covers at the top, at the bottom, and then most importantly, right here at the bottom by the oil pan. One thing that for me is critical is checking for blow-by. What blow-by really is the smoke. You gotta have smoke out here. There's an output, okay, right here, okay? If you see that there's smoke coming out of there, this is a signal that something could be wrong internally. Now, one thing that I do is I usually put my hand down there, and that's the way that I check. It's a very simple method, okay? I check to see if there's any smoke. If I got a stain or oil or something in my hand, that's telling me to be cautious and beware. Next thing you want to do is you want to check the oil level of the truck. So when you check the oil level, first, make sure that truck has had the proper amount of oil in there. You can check that in the dipstick, right? But what you want to also check for is the actual oil itself. If you see that the oil is kind of thick or murky, there could be something wrong there. Why? Because this means that there could be contamination in the oil, meaning there could be something wrong with the engine. Now, I will tell you this, maybe, okay, if it's an older truck, the owner might have changed the oil recently, but the oil could have gotten, dark or gotten black because it's an older truck. But again, you will kind of know by checking the oil if it looks murky, if it looks thick, okay, then you'll know that could be a signal that there may be something wrong going on inside the engine. One thing that also goes in hand with the engine is the radiator. Okay, you want to make sure that the radiator is intact, meaning the following. You want to make sure, is there antifreeze in that radiator? Let me explain to you why. If you go up there and you check that it's missing radiator fluid, meaning antifreeze, this is a signal that there's a leak. And if there's a leak, again, that could be a potential problem. Another thing you want to do is you want to walk around the truck, and it may be a little difficult, so just be careful. You want to get up here, and what you want to do is you want to check for rust. Make sure there's no rust around the radiator. Guys, there's another thing you can do. It's called a dyno test. Dyno test is where you can grab a sample of the oil from the engine, okay? And you can take this actually to several places. The big mechanic shops, they can test the oil to see if it has contamination or pollutants. Also, dealerships do this for you. So you might want to check before who can do that for you. If you really want to kind of go another level with it, is you ask the guy who's selling the truck or the individual, hey, can I grab an oil sample, okay? And then what you do is you take that oil sample, you do that dyno test, and they'll actually check to see if there's any pollutants or any contaminations. And what that checks for is, you know, metal, the wear and tear, viscosity, and several other things that tell you if there's something going on inside that engine. Another way for you to look at it, guys, it's kind of like taking blood from an individual. You know, if you've ever gone to, and they've ever drawn blood from you, what do they do when they draw blood? It's a test, right? Where it tells you if there's anything going wrong with that person internally. Well, it's the same thing for the engine. When they draw that oil sample and they send it to get tested, it'll tell you what's going on inside the engine. So guys, now we're gonna move on to the following, which is the transmission. Now guys, transmission is the second most important part. Similar to the engine, okay, what you wanna do is you wanna check for leaks. Make sure there's no leaks. And actually, this is kind of easy for us because the transmission on this truck right now is actually not here, but it's actually over here. And I can point right out to the areas you wanna look for, okay? This truck is being actually worked on right now, and it's actually getting a new transmission. So when it's actually inside the truck, so you want to make sure there's no leaks, right? But also, very important, guys, you need to take somebody to test drive the truck, okay? Well, why is that so important? Well, you probably figured, well, they got to get a feel. Is the truck driving good? Well, here's the thing. Whoever you take to drive the truck, they need to make sure that the gears are going in smooth and that the truck is working properly, meaning the transmission is not jumping any gears. Now, if that driver that's driving that truck for you, or you're the one driving the truck and test driving it, you want to make sure that there's no slippage and that the transmission is not actually skipping any gears. If there's slippage or it's skipping gears, meaning gears don't want to kick in, they don't want to set in place, and you're having to jump that gear, that is bad news. One more component, guys, that goes hand in hand with the transmission is the clutch. So clutch goes hand in hand with the transmission. So what you want to do for is that individual is going to test drive the truck, or if it's yourself, you got to check that clutch, okay? Make sure that the clutch is nice and smooth. What'll happen sometimes is if the transmission has slippage or feels like it's going out, I can almost tell you that that clutch also has to be replaced. One thing, guys, when you test the clutches, you want to make sure there's a little bit of free play. When I mean by nice and smooth, and usually it's about 2 to 3 inches. If you feel like it's too high, that could be an issue. Just to give you a visual, guys, if it's all the way up here, that's what I meant by it's too high. Now, if it has a little bit of play, what I meant by 2 or 3 inches, and that's a go. The next thing, guys, just as important as the transmission, the rear end and differentials, guys, very important, okay? And the same thing you want to make sure and check for is no oil leaks, okay? When you're test driving the truck, and if it's your first time buying a dump truck, again, I don't know if it'll be yourself driving it, but if it's somebody else driving the truck, like I recommended in the beginning, take somebody that has experience. One thing you want to look out for, really here for, is vibration. If you hear a sound or a vibration coming from the back, there could be an issue in your rear end. The next thing, guys, that works hand in hand with the rear end, the differentials, okay, is the driveline and the yoke. You want to get down here or have the mechanic get down here, okay, and check for play. Check those yokes, make sure they're not loose. If they are, that means there could be something going on in there, and there could potentially also be some issues happening down there with your rear ends. The next thing you want to look for, suspension. And what you want to look for in a suspension, any worn bushings. If you see worn bushings, that potentially means that the truck is out of alignment, and now you may have to replace not only one, but all the bushings around the suspension. and that could cost you some money. One more thing that I highly suggest also is getting down there and looking if there's any cracks in the actual suspension. If there is, again, this could be a potential problem, especially down the road, because you will have to replace an entire part of the suspension, and that is also expensive, my friends. The following thing, guys, now that we're here, brakes and drums. Look inside, look down here and make sure the brakes and drums, the wear and tear on the brakes and drums, because if you have to replace all the brakes and the drums, guys, it's gonna cost you quite a bit of money. So make sure either yourself or a mechanic, take somebody with you that has some experience and be looking out for all these things, because all these things will start to add up. And guys, now that we're here, next thing, tires. You want to make sure that the tire's in good shape. The thread, you can stick a penny or stick your finger in there and it gives you kind of the depth of how much thread is and how much life is left. And guys, if it's only one tire, two tires, that may be all right. But if you got 8 tires to replace, you already know it's gonna cost you some money. Another thing is the tires in the front, okay? You definitely wanna check for wear and tear of the tires in the front. If there's wear and tear in the tires in the front, one thing I like to look for is the wear and tear even. If it's not, and there's a significant amount of wear or tear on one side more than the other, this means there's an alignment issue. But guess what? If there's an alignment issue, there's probably something else going on with the truck. It could be several different factors. You want to make sure that there's no wear and tear, and if there is it even on the front tires? Guys, now that we're here also, one thing that's important is air leaks. And you can hear that, an air leak, right? There's air leaks, right? That could potentially happen throughout the entire truck. If you hear an air leak, that could be several things. One primarily could be a valve that may need to be replaced, but check for air leaks. And the reason why, guys, if you buy the truck, now that might not break the deal, right? But you want to get the air leaks fixed. If you don't, and you're out on the road and you got an air leak, you know what's going to happen? DOT is going to come for you, and that could also potentially be an out of service for you. Not to mention, if you have an air leak and there's not sufficient air supply going in for your brakes will lock up, and then you'll definitely have an issue. And guys, because we are talking about a dump truck here, right? And we're all about dump trucks, right here, what do we have? The dump body. One thing I like to look for is make sure there's no holes or punctures on the dump body, okay? Why? 2 reasons. One, if you have holes or punctures and you get loaded, material is probably gonna come out from those holes or the punctures. That could be a problem, right? The other thing is you're gonna have to get that replaced or get that fixed, and of course that's gonna cost you money and downtime. So guys, now that we're talking about the dump body, the hydraulic cylinder, one thing you want to look for is oil leaks, okay? Now, if you see an oil leak, that means that sooner or later, you're gonna have to replace those leaks, meaning you're gonna have to replace the seals inside the cylinder. And let me tell you, that's gonna cost you some money. And since we're talking about the dump body, other things you wanna look for is when you go inside the truck, PTO, make sure that PTO is being activated so that you can do this here, right? Lift that dump body, tailgate switch, make sure the tailgate switch works so that that tailgate can open and can close, right? To make sure your load is secure. And also guys, tarp, make sure that tarp is working. I've seen it where people buy a truck and they never check for the tarp. Now I know this may be a smaller issue, but if the tarp's not working, you got to get it fixed before you actually go out on the road. While you're inside the truck, guys, you want to check for the next few things, okay? You want to make sure that the AC is working. Depending on where you're at, if you're here, it's hot. AC, you need it. If you're up north, I'm sure you want to check for a heater. Make sure the heater's working, right? If not, these are things you will have to replace and they're going to cost you money, okay? Another thing that you want to make sure is all the buttons in there, you know, the different functions. Make sure they're all working. Sit there and, you know, check everything that's in there in the dashboard. Make sure that everything's working properly. The gauges, guys, the fuel gauge. Also very important, oil pressure gauge. I'm going to tell you what myself, Jay Mancini, does. These are just a bonus for you, okay? This is what I like to do. These are some tips, okay? What I look out for is the following, okay? Not only everything I just showed you, but I actually like to ask specific questions. One thing I like to ask is, when was the last time you worked the truck? Okay? Now, if they say, well, the truck is working, well, guess what? Great. That means if the truck is working, the next thing I'll ask him is, so Mr. Seller, when are you going back to work? Let's just say he says, well, I'm going to be working the truck tomorrow. What I like to do, okay, I like to go even a step further and I'll ask him, do you mind if I go out there to the job site, okay, and maybe not get off my vehicle, but I just want to see the truck in action. Meaning, I want to see the truck working, especially when the truck is loaded. Now you're probably thinking, Jay, why do you want to do that? Well, this to me tells me a few things, okay? And what it tells me is I can get a visual of what that truck looks like while it's on the road, especially when it's loaded. And I can look and see, hey, is this truck, when it's on the road, does it look smooth? Does it look solid while it's there running, while it's going back and forth? Is there something that I might have missed out on that I didn't get to see while the truck was just sitting there, okay? So these are little tips and things that I like to personally look for. Now the seller might tell you, well, no, I'm selling the truck, it's been sitting here for a month, okay? And if that's the case, well, there's not much you can do about it. But the one thing you can ask them if the truck has been sitting there is, guys, one thing you want to do is let me see the inspection report, okay? Well, if the truck's been sitting for a long time, this may not be a good thing, okay? I don't really like buying trucks that sit for a long time because a lot of things tend to go wrong on a vehicle when it's just sitting there, and that's just in general, okay? So you need to make sure you look for an inspection report, right? And let's just say the inspection report was close to a year away from the date you're actually buying the truck. You need to be cautious. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful, and if there's something I might have missed out on, drop a comment below. I'll be more than happy to get to that comment and reply, okay? And don't forget, May 6th, guys, we're going live. So if you actually register and you log in and you have a question, hold it and pause it and save it for May 6th, and maybe I'll get to answer that question on the live. So again, May 6th, we're going live. Make sure you register at the link below, and we'll see you there. This is Jay Mancini, as you already know, where we keep the wheels rolling, the cash flowing. Make sure you like and subscribe, drop a comment, and we'll see you soon.